Hi, everybody. Jeff Toyster here. I am excited to be joined today by Annette Franz, who is the author of Customer Understanding, 3 Ways to Put the Customer in Customer Experience and at the Heart of Your Business, a brand new book that's just coming out. And we're going to talk today about why journey mapping is the backbone of customer experience management. Now, I've known Annette for a while, and she's someone that I really look up to and learn a lot from when it comes to customer experience. So this is exciting for me. Annette, how are you today?
I'm great. I am awesome, and thank you for having me. I appreciate it. This is going to be a fun conversation. As you know, journey mapping is one of my favorite topics, so this is going to be a fun conversation for us to have today.
I think it will be, and that's exactly what we're going to talk about. We'll jump into it in just a moment. But you're one of the people that I turn to when I want to define customer experience, and I know a lot of people probably have different perceptions of what customer experience really means. Can you give us your definition? What is customer experience?
Yeah, so real funny story before I define that. So this morning, my aunt texted me and said, I was looking for your book on Amazon and I was searching on customer service, and I texted her back and I said, well, it's a good thing I don't write about customer service, because she said it was like 10 or 20 pages back. And so I was like, oh, it's a good thing I don't write about customer service. So then I had to explain to her the difference between customer experience and customer service. So customer experience is the sum of all the interactions that a customer has with a brand over the life of the relationship with that brand. And probably even more importantly, it's the feelings, the emotions, and the perceptions that somebody has about those interactions. And customer service, I would like to say, and I don't want to discount customer service, obviously, but it's one of those interactions.
And I think that's a good, maybe a good distinction, if you will. I sometimes get the mental image of those Russian stacking dolls, the Matryoshka dolls. And so the
Yep.
big one is customer experience, and then you pop the top off and you pull out customer service, and which is, my focus and specialty, but I'm realizing more and more I'm still in the customer experience game, even if I'm not thinking about all of those interactions. And then it gets challenging because your aunt, many of our clients and customers sometimes don't make the distinction. They're calling service experience, and I'm seeing customer service teams call themselves customer experience teams. So it's getting confusing. Thanks for clarifying that.
It's very confusing. And I obviously the good news is everybody's focusing on the customer, right? So that's the important part, whatever you call it. But, for those of us who are in the customer experience space, we do like to, make sure we get the definition right and have people thinking that, customer experience is really the big picture. And I say this all the time. The best way to distinguish the two is Chris Zane's quote. You've probably seen this, where he said, the service is what happens when the experience breaks down. So I love that distinction, right?
And it's an interesting distinction for me, and I've seen that as a customer service person. I push back a little bit and say, well, wait a minute.
Right.
Service can be proactive. It doesn't have to be when something breaks down. And the simplest example I'll give you is if you walk into a retail store and you're in that store, not necessarily because you have a problem, you might be there just to find the right product. And if someone proactively approaches you and guides your journey, that's obviously part of the customer experience. I would also say that's part of customer service as well. But I think the perspective a lot of people have is if you're in a contact center, the only reason someone's calling you is something went wrong. And so in some perspectives, I can see how a lot of people would look at it as this is the breakdown point.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good distinction there too, because I think of customer service two different ways, right? There's the department, and then there's that, to your point, the retail associate, the person walks up to you and provides you with that service, right? So I think of it two different ways. I think that the real thinking about customer experience versus customer services, customer experience is more like we're thinking big picture, we're thinking strategy, we're thinking organization wide, and not just focused on one piece or one department, right? We're thinking about everything. We're thinking about the product, we're thinking about the technology, we're thinking about the culture, we're thinking about the employee experience. So it's really sort of big picture. And as you mentioned about those Russian dolls, right? So if we continue to unpack that, there's a lot of other things that sit inside there. So.
Well, and
I
that's
think
what
there's a blog post in there for one of us, by the way.
it is. It absolutely is. And that's what we're going to talk about today is identifying all of those points through journey mapping. And so I wonder, again, to level set for people who are watching or listening, what is customer journey mapping?
So journey mapping is really a tool and a process, right? So it's a tool to help us walk through the experience that the customer has as they're interacting with the brand from, some point A to point B. It's a way for us to walk in their shoes. It's a way to build empathy, and it's a way for us to really understand what the experience is like today so that we can redesign it for tomorrow. And I think that it's really important, and it's something that we do with and for and by customers, right? And I think one of the things that ends up happening is people end up doing it wrong because they are either doing it internally and think they know and really create process maps, or they're just looking too high level at life cycle stages and touch points. You've really got to get in there and walk in the customer's shoes. That's what journey mapping is all about, is walking in their shoes.
So this might be a self-evident question, but there's something in your book that really stood out. You said that journey mapping is the backbone of customer experience management.
Yeah.
Why do you say that?
Well, because it's a tool and it's a process. And so if you look at the entire process and you look at, even if you just look at the tool, it touches and it impacts and affects and it informs so many pieces and parts of the organization and there's a graphic in the book to that kind of lays it out and kind of spells it out. If you have a visual in front of you, it's certainly helpful to understand that. But it feeds into all of these different areas of the organization. So that's why I call it the backbone of customer experience management.
So, something else you said that I think is important. I recently did an interview with Elizabeth Swan, who's an expert in Lean Six Sigma, and we were talking about process mapping. And one of the things we were careful about to talk about is there's a difference between journey mapping and process mapping. Yet I know that those two often get confused. From your perspective, what's the distinction? Why does it matter?
So there's actually sort of 3 levels of mapping that we do, and then 2 of them can be combined, right? So journey mapping is all about the customer and what's happening for and with and by the customer, right? So we call that what's happening on stage. And then the other 2 types of maps are service blueprints and process mapping, and sometimes the 2 get combined, and that's perfectly fine. But they're looking at really sort of that surface to core of the organization. So what's happening on the inside to support the experience that the customer's having. So it's the people, tools, system, processes, policies that are happening on the inside and behind the scenes that are supporting the experience that the customer ultimately has.
Gotcha. And I think that's important for companies to understand that the journey map really focuses beyond just the company. And as an example, I traveled this past weekend, and when I got to the airport, the line for TSA security was about 3 times as long as it normally was. Now, does that something that is controlled directly by the airline employees? No. Did that influence my experience flying that particular day? Absolutely. And we see a lot of examples like that where when we look at the journey map, all of a sudden we look even beyond steps the company controls.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important, right? Because you've got to bring in all of the things that are outside of the brand's control too, because to your point, it impacts the experience. So when we're doing the journey mapping, we define, this point A to point B. I like to use the example of going to get coffee, right? So, in your head, you've got this notion that you want some coffee and you're going to go to whatever coffee shop it is. So when we map the journey, we map from the moment you say, hey, I want some coffee, then you go, you get in the car, you drive to the coffee shop, there's no parking, traffic sucked the whole way there, that kind of thing. So by the time you got to the coffee shop, you're already, frustrated and angry because it took you, 20 minutes to go when it should have gone, 5 minutes, a 5-minute trip. So when you get into the coffee shop, now you get in there and there's a line and you're waiting and all of that. That stuff inside the store is obviously controlled by the store and by the brand. The stuff that happened before and what happens after isn't, but it's then the brand's responsibility to mitigate those things. So you love going to that store. You will go there and endure 20 minutes worth of traffic and 10 minutes of finding parking because you love going there because, you know, it's great coffee, it's a great atmosphere, the baristas, they all know you and blah, 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 all those wonderful things, right? So your job as a brand is to make sure that that experience is as delightful and amazing as it is so that the customer will keep coming back. Yes, I will endure that 20-minute trip because I love the coffee and I want that experience. I love going there, you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, so when we journey map, we look at what happens before, what happens after, and the details even along the way that the brand doesn't necessarily control but has to mitigate for them or design around or for them.
And I like how you're using the term mitigate. And one of the things that I often get pushback on is a leader will say, well, I don't control the traffic, for example. That's out of my control. Why do I worry about that? Yet we know that if I'm stuck in traffic, my emotions are high, I'm frustrated. So I'm primed for a negative interaction as soon as I walk in that door. And I guess there's two ways to do it, right? I could ignore it and say it's not my fault. And then the person gets ignited very quickly over the smallest thing. Or I could realize they were probably stuck in traffic and maybe take some steps to make them feel better, to soothe that anger, to be a positive oasis in the traffic jungle that they experience.
Exactly. It's some Zen environment, or you're handing out free muffins as they walk in the door, or, you know, there's some fun videos, you know, whatever the brand decides to do. But yeah, absolutely. You've got to be that oasis when they get there. So.
Now, one of the things I like about your book is that it really walked through the process of journey mapping. And I think it's important because I don't know, you might know of it, but I don't know of a lot of resources that really give you that kind of step-by-step guidance. And so if people are listening, they're saying, I think this journey mapping could be important. I want to do it, but I want to do it right. From a big picture perspective, what are some steps that organizations can take to start journey mapping and understanding that customer perspective?
Yeah, they can read the book, right? So it's funny because, yay! I didn't even set you up for that one or anything. So I get people asking me all the time, like, how do you do it? What's the best part? Is there certification out there? Is there a book out there? And this is a question that's come up to me many times over the years. And I'm like, it's coming, it's right here. But so a couple of things to think about. Number one is you have to remember it's a tool and a process. That's such an important thing to remember, right? You can map, but if you don't do all the other things around it to get you prepared for it, and then after you're done mapping, go and do something with it, then it's just, you know, a pretty picture on the wall. So, you know, there's this whole planning process, and I go into all these 6 steps in detail in the book, and then I do provide an outline of how to set up and facilitate your own workshop. But you have to have, you know, you go through this planning process because you got to know, you know, why are you doing it and what are you going to do with it when you're done with the map. And then you go into I'm going to just do it real high level here, just because we could actually talk about this for like an hour. But so you go through the planning process, and you go into the workshop itself, and you got to make sure you've got customers and stakeholders in there. The customers are going to be mapping, and they're going to be doing the work, so to speak. And then once you get out of that workshop, you've now got to take what you learned and heard in that workshop and do something with it. So you got to start doing a little bit of root cause analysis and really trying to understand what's happening and why it's happening. You want to then go and develop your service blueprint, which we just talked about. So you want to really understand what are those tools and systems and people and processes that are adding to or detracting from the experience that the customer is having, right? And that's a really important piece that I don't think a lot of people do, but you can't fix what's happening on the outside if you don't fix what's happening on the inside first. So, and then from there we go into redesigning the experience, go into that future state workshop. And this is a great time to bring customers in and just really ideate what's the ideal experience for them. And it's fun because, you know, sometimes they come up with crazy ideas, and sometimes really all they want is something that you should be doing anyways, right? And clients will sit there and go, why didn't we think of that? Why aren't we even doing that? You know, so that's a fun workshop to do with customers, is to really understand what would your ideal experience be. We know we're breaking down over here. And then the last step is to, prototype it and test it with your customers, and then implement it and roll it out and train your employees on the new experience and that they've got to deliver it, and let your customers know what the new experience is. Don't design a new, experience without setting expectations with your customers, or telling them, hey, you know what, it was X, Y, and Z before, but now it's A, B, and C, and so I want you to have realistic expectations about what the experience is going to be like in the future. So that's at a very high level. That's the process, and that's how organizations are really going to drive change. And all of those pieces, to the point about being the backbone of customers, all of those pieces feed into a lot of different areas of the organization and help with, executive alignment and the employee experience and process improvements and all of those different kinds of things. And so that's why I call it the backbone, because it's such a weighty and such a powerful tool.
So if you're listening to this, your head might hurt a little bit, because this is not a quick fix or an overnight sensation. Hey, we met for 2 hours. Now we're good.
Yeah,
exactly. But there's two things I think I want to take away from this. One is that it really starts from seeing things from the customer's perspective. I really like your coffee shop example, that we don't know what that customer went through until they walk through our doors, unless we ask them. But what they went through might influence how we interact with them, how we serve them, how can we make their experience better. And so involving customers, that's such a great takeaway. The second piece that I think is important, though, is for organizations to understand this is not simple. There's a lot of work to be done. But there's some big payoffs. And so I kind of want to, I know we're running a little short on time, but what's the payoff for putting all this effort into doing it right?
Well, the payoff is that your customers are going to come back, right? This is all about taking a look at what your desired business outcomes are, but also what the desired outcomes are for customers. And if you get the experience right, they're going to come back and they're going to tell their friends too. So that's the big payout is you're going to keep your customers and you're going to keep them happy.
All right. And then I think I want to make sure that people can find your book, because it provides a lot more detail around these steps that we're talking about. And I hope they can find your blog as well. I learned a lot from reading your blog. You write a lot, but you provide a lot of practical guidance and insight. So how can they find both your book and your blog?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. So the book is available on Amazon right now. It's only Amazon. So you can go onto Amazon and just search my name and you can find it there. Or you can go to my site, cx-journey.com/book, and there's a link to the book and where you can buy it on my website. So, or from my website. So yeah, so thank you for that. I appreciate it. And there's a contact page there too. You can sign up for my newsletter and get the blog in your inbox every week. So there's a lot of great ways to reach out to me and hear more from me.
All right, everybody, get the book, read the blog, continue your customer experience education. And when I'm looking for that education, I'm going to Annette. So Annette, thanks for spending some time with me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. And I will just flip that back to you too and say, you know what, Jeff is an amazing author, an amazing trainer. If you need help on the customer service side of things and customer service experience, Jeff's your guy. So yeah, that's a two-way street there. So I appreciate everything you do as well.
That's very kind of you. Thanks, Annette.